Ronald, the rules lawyer. Today is some kind of weird hybrid video that I'm going to do where I comment on XP to level 3's first Pathfinder 2e game that he's ever GM'd, where he runs the Pathfinder beginner box. And I'm also going to talk about problems I think exist in the beginner box which affected his experience and give advice on running it. Jacob of XP to level 3 just released a video in a mockumentary style of his first experience GMing Pathfinder for his friends. This is great. XP to level 3 is one of the largest D&D channels. He has a lot of funny skits, and for years it's been clear that he has had some frustrations with D&D. Here's a video that I really like in which he portrays the frustrations of being a DM for a high-level party in the system. By the way, I'm going to mention a lot of videos in this video, and I don't want to say link in the description over and over again. You can count on finding links to all of the videos today in the description. So I was not surprised, but I was very happy to see him running Pathfinder. But the video also illustrated for me some problems I think exist. I'm going to list 8 problems I see in the beginner box and also give advice on how to deal with them. What's my cred? I've been a long time game master of Pathfinder 1e and 2e and D&D 5e for the last 15 years. I've run at least 1,000 sessions, maybe 2,000 sessions. Also, on my Discord server, we once ran a beginner box weekend right after the OGL scandal, where over 100 GMs volunteered to run the game for people, and me and other people in my server led that event and gave advice to the GMs. People should join my Discord, by the way, to talk Pathfinder. We have over 6,000 people there. Before I move on, let me introduce myself. I'm Ronald, the rules lawyer. I'm a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. For 8 years, I ran an after-school, middle-school tabletop RPG class. Support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. For an explanation, look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. So here's what I'll cover in this video, in order. First, why I still recommend the beginner box. Then I talk about XP to level 3's video. Then I list 8 problems in the beginner box and how to address them. And then I talk about alternative adventures and possible follow-up adventures for people who use the beginner box. Why I still recommend the beginner box. I still think it is the best intro product and the easiest way someone can learn a tabletop role-playing game system that exists out there, the best product. On screen is a video I did early in the life of my channel reviewing the beginner box, in which I show its components and I run through the first room and show how easy it is to learn the system through this product. It teaches the game as you play. You can literally open the box and start playing. It teaches the rules to the GM and the players simultaneously through a set of situations. It's very chunky with a full color fold-out double-sided map for the starter dungeon, very thick cardboard pawns, dozens of them for all of the monsters that are included in the bestiary, including ones that are not in the starter adventure. Very visually appealing pre-generated character sheets with backstories, reference cards that show you what you can do on your turn. Beyond running the starter adventure, it gives you rules for the 4 core classes that are presented so you can advance them to level 3, and tools for GMs to create their own adventures, including magic items. And it would have been a perfect gift for 9-year-old me who looked at the red box in the 1980s. I would have loved this. However, there are some ways in which I think it's lacking, and they are relatively minor in the grand scheme of things given how much it nails and does completely right. And I hope they can be addressed possibly in a future printing. And in the meantime, I hope that this video can be a resource for GMs who are running it now. All right, let's talk about the XP to level 3 video. It was a pleasure to watch, and I'm frankly disappointed in myself that when I saw this on my recommended, that I didn't immediately think of filming my first reaction to it. However, before I completely finished my first viewing, I did do a live stream of myself reacting to it while interacting with the community. Now, to be clear, this is not Jacob's first experience with Pathfinder. Since last summer, he's been playing in, I believe, his first Pathfinder game and campaign in Eberron City of Towers, a live-streamed game on the Arcane arcade channel, which you should all subscribe to and follow. They've already done 37 sessions, but yeah, this is the first time Jacob has GM'd Pathfinder, and he runs it for a group, most of whom had not played Pathfinder before. The video is part of his Dungeon Delve series, where they were done in a mockumentary style. It incorporates clips of their game along with side interviews with the players. I found it very entertaining. They overall liked the system, and they also expressed things that they liked a little bit less, including their opinion on the rogue class. Before I discuss that, I want to tell some members of the Pathfinder 2e community to lay the fuck off. Most people have been very friendly in the comments, correcting some rules mistakes that they made, or giving some feedback on why they are probably underappreciating the rogue. However, some people are just downright rude and are breaking Wheaton's law of don't be a dick, and not taking into account that there are human beings on the other side. And I can say from personal experience that it takes some courage to put yourself out there as a content creator and have your mistakes be up there permanently for the world to see. Especially, I think, for people who are used to D&D entering the Pathfinder 2e content creation sphere, Pathfinder 2e players have kind of a reputation of being very, they'll correct you if you're wrong about something. So much so that Jack, who is a player in this video and has been the game master of their Eberron campaign, was visibly nervous in the first session that he ran. And I just want to thank Jack at this time for introducing Pathfinder to that group and to Jacob, because this is now where we're at. Thank you. And to those Pathfinder commenters that I am criticizing now, remember that this video is a great thing. Keep your perspective. And in fact, I think that there is a quiet sea change going on in the overall tabletop role-playing game community away from D&D 5.0, 5.5 towards other games right now that I might focus on in a future video. It's kind of clear when you watch Jacob's video here that it was kind of conceived as a kind of a promotional video for Pathfinder 2e, while reflecting at the same time his and Jack's understanding of the system. Jacob clearly loves Pathfinder, and in the Eberron campaign, he's consistently the one who's exclaiming how much he likes this or that rule or system. This video is basically Jacob making a serious effort to make his mostly D&D playing audience try out Pathfinder. It's good. Me gusta. Es gefällt mir. It's super affengeil. All right, now let's talk about their take on the rogue, which a number of Pathfinder players have jumped on because they express in the video that they think that the rogue is weak and frustrating. I think someone who has a good amount of experience with Pathfinder 2e, if they find a class to be weak, will first ask themselves, is there something I don't understand here? Is there a rule I'm not taking into account or a feature I'm not understanding? People who are not as familiar with Pathfinder are more likely to, if they have a frustrating experience with a class, assume it's the designer's fault. It's the class design. And I think this is due to experience mainly with another system that is evolutionarily related to Pathfinder, where people are used to seeing lackluster balance from the designers. And so their inquiry ends there. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions at all on these players. No, it's more of an indictment of Hasbro and how they've lowered expectations among their players due to stagnation in 5e's design over the last several years. Here, I think this is just a common situation where 5e players are bringing their 5e assumptions over, which is preventing them from engaging with the rogue on its own terms within Pathfinder. People should see this video, by the way, where I cover the top 10 most common mistakes D&D players make while learning Pathfinder. And in that video, I actually make the comment that experience with 5e can actually be a hindrance to learning the system on its own terms. Sometimes people brand new to tabletop role-playing games can catch on to its mechanics more quickly. So Jacob's group complained about the difficulties in making an enemy off guard. Jacob had played a ranged rogue in the Eberron campaign and had difficulty doing that.
I played a little rogue in a game that we streamed on Arcane Arcade, and I changed my class because I hated it. It's bad.
Here, the rogue player, Pepper, had a frustrating time trying to sneak up on enemies.
But I did the math. I think if I did this and then maybe the first two of my next turn, then I can have sneak attack. Is that 5 actions for 1 instance of sneak attack?
I'll get to the ranged rogue later, but for the beginner box rogue that Pepper played, you can just flank a foe. You can just be on opposite sides of one of your allies, and that enemy is off guard, which is all you need to trigger your sneak attack damage. It also gives them a -2 circumstance penalty to their armor class, which also makes it more likely you can critically hit them in this system. Hiding and sneaking all require skill checks. You move at half your speed while sneaking, and it can be frustrating. And that's what happened in their game. Flanking requires no check, and also it helps your ally, who also is now flanking the foe. On Jacob's frustration with the ranged rogue, this is also bringing some 5e assumptions, because in 5e, the meta, what's considered optimal, is to play a ranged rogue, because you can inflict sneak attack damage on an enemy so long as just one of your allies is adjacent to the foe. In Pathfinder, you need to make an enemy off guard, and range attacks don't benefit from flanking. You have to be in melee to benefit from that. Here you need to create a diversion. It's a deception check that might not succeed, and it costs an action. And Jacob, for his Eberron rogue, had a gun, which in Pathfinder, nearly all guns require another action to reload it between shots. So it was very action intensive and understandably frustrating for Jacob. If you're a ranged rogue in Pathfinder, well, there are some builds like a mastermind rogue, which will make this easier. But outside of that, you are going to be relying more on your teammates to make enemies off guard for you, such as grappling them or tripping them. By the way, an enemy who's prone on the ground is easier to hit with a bow than if they were standing, unlike in 5e. So it requires more teamwork, and for this, the GM of the Eberron campaign had this comment in the video.
Rogue's not my favorite. The people that are gonna get mad at Jacob for hating Rogue are gonna say, well, you need to leave it up to other party members to give you the off-guard condition against the creature or creatures that you're facing, but there's never really a guarantee that anybody's going to do that. There's a lot of Pathfinder 2e that is about working together and synergizing your turns with each other, where this person's ability allows this person to do this, or this person casts a spell that gives this person a bonus to this, right? But there's never a guarantee that that's actually gonna happen. So it's just kind of rough.
If anything, this just acknowledges that Pathfinder requires more teamwork, and if you're a ranged rogue, you need to have a conversation with your party. Talk to them, and if they don't want to set things up for you, and there are valid reasons why they might not want to, then maybe do something different. Maybe you need to go into melee more, or have a weapon that doesn't require an action to reload before blaming the class. Ronald from the future. Now, before anyone jumps on Jacob and his group saying that they're against teamwork, I just want to include this clip from the Eberron campaign where Jacob says it's one of the things he likes about Pathfinder, that it encourages teamwork.
This seems a lot better.
It is.
I just want to say, once again, a thing I love about Pathfinder 2e is all of its abilities and its spells encourage cooperation. It's one of my favorite things.
And also, in all of their expression of frustrations with the rogue, I don't know if they know that you can get sneak attack damage multiple times in a turn. That's something cool about Pathfinder. The 3-action economy means you can attack more than one time. You don't need to remember whether you've already done sneak attack damage. So let's say you're the rogue player and the fighter's right after you in initiative. Maybe you should delay so that the fighter can go run up against that spider, so that when you walk up to it, you can make 2 strikes and possibly give sneak attack damage 2 times. There are also many ways to make enemies off guard in Pathfinder through skills, and this is where I transition to problems in the beginner box and how to address them. And the first one is that I think the beginner box does not do enough to emphasize and teach skill actions to players. Some of the reason why they have a poor impression of the rogue, I think, falls on the beginner box itself. The Dungeon Dudes did a good review of the Pathfinder beginner box in their channel, and this was one of their first criticisms.
This was one of the things, though, that I did think needed to be on these cards, or on the character sheets, because it wasn't until we started diving into the hero book and realizing that basically every skill in Pathfinder, from acrobatics to athletics to stealth to deception, has actions associated with it. And not only does it have actions associated with it, those use your skill in combat in a cool way. And I was kind of disappointed that the character sheets and that didn't place an emphasis on this.
There are many other ways to make an enemy off guard in Pathfinder. The deception skill lets you spend an action to feint in melee or to create a diversion. If you critically succeed on a feint, they are off guard against your melee attacks until the end of your next turn. Athletics is a way to make enemies off guard by grabbing or tripping them. Something that Valeros the fighter can do, or Marisol herself. It's one of her many skills to help her allies. There are so many ways to make an enemy off guard that I made a song about it, one of the first videos on my channel, in which I sang about the 12 rounds of combat.
Because I made you look, you simply failed to see my dagger in your eyes.
Also, one of my commenters pointed out that the front page of the Mauricio pregen says sneak up to foes to sneak attack them. So it's completely understandable for Pepper to take that at face value and think that's the way you get sneak attack damage. And it's called sneak attack, for Christ's sake. And skills have so many cool uses in Pathfinder, and as a rogue, Mauricio has so many skills. Mauricio having 12 is completely normal at level 1. And as a rogue, she gains a skill feat at level 1, and every level thereafter. Every other class gets it every even-numbered level. And characters in Pathfinder can improve their skills from trained to expert, master, or legendary every odd-numbered level, starting with 3rd. Well, a rogue can do it every level, starting at 2nd level. Part of the Pathfinder rogue's power budget is in their skills. And remember, this is a system where when you get to level 15 and can make your intimidation legendary, you can take the skill feat Scared to Death, which does exactly what it says. The medicine skill, which Mauricio was also proficient in, lets you restore hit points between combats. But the beginner box doesn't highlight any of this, at least not on its reference cards or on the pre-generated character sheets that most players will be solely relying on. I see some brand new groups not knowing to heal hit points after the first combat. There should be a prompt for that for the GM in the GM's book for people to heal after that first fight. And also, I have to say eek about the stabilize action in the beginner box Hero's Handbook, which Jacob relied on in the video, because it says that the DC of preventing someone from dying with your medicine skill is 21. That's plain wrong. That's not the DC. It is supposed to be 15 plus the dying value in the core rules. Another problem, and I think it's very related in the beginner box, is that it does not explicitly encourage teamwork. I'm not aware of a Pathfinder product that explicitly tells the reader, hey, you should do more than just damage on your turn. You should look at what your skills can do. Also, attacking multiple times on your turn kind of sucks with a multiple attack penalty, and you should see what you can do besides attacking, and also how you can support your teammates. Teamwork makes the dream work. This is all orthodoxy if you go on the Pathfinder 2e subreddit, where people say this all the time to new players and to new GMs about mistakes they should avoid. Now, there's one thing the beginner box does to teach this, by the way, in the solo adventure for the Hero's Handbook, where it counterposes making a 3rd attack to doing something else. But many people will not play the solo adventure, and this box is designed so that one way you can engage with it is you just open it up and your group plays it together. So I have this one suggestion, and if you're wondering why I might be giving a lot of great advice in my videos, it's because I freely steal from my community. I want to thank Ghost in the Machine for making this comment to my recent video, where they give a suggestion for the beginner box and say, having a page in the character booklet or part of the general player's reference of, quote, how do I help, unquote, with recommendations for how to help other party members. Valeros's, he's the fighter, might mention flanking, grapple, and trip to help Mauricio get sneak attack. A general one might be, quote, how do I help an ally that has fallen unconscious, unquote, which might mention healing with a spell or potion and the treat wounds action. Number 3 is that there are no map boxes. MAP is the community's acronym for the multiple attack penalty. You can attack 3 times in your turn, but each attack gives diminishing returns. You are less and less accurate. And the character sheets of the beginner box only give a single stat for your attacks. Not everybody is math inclined and is able to, on the fly, subtract 5 and 10 from their attacks. And some weapons are agile, like Mauricio's short sword, and it's not spelled out on the sheet that the multiple attack penalty is smaller for an agile weapon, that it's -4 and -8. This is something you have to just know. It would be better if it were written out. Now, Jacob's group did not complain about this, and they seem to have no issue with subtracting the penalty, though I only watched the edited version, and maybe they had more issue on the full VOD, I don't know. But nearly everyone would benefit from having the 3 bonuses written out. And I think for a beginner product especially, it should at least let you have the opportunity to. Number 4 is that the beginner box gives no prompts to teach players exploration activities. By the time you get to the second fight in the beginner box, it prompts the game master to ask for alternatives to perception to roll for initiative, including rolling stealth. However, it has not prompted anybody, including the GM, to avoid notice, which is what you usually need to do to roll stealth for initiative. It has not talked about exploration activities. Exploration activities are important and are part of the core gameplay loop in Pathfinder 2e. When you're not in the middle of an encounter, your character can be focusing on one of these activities. I'm showing you a page from the beginner box Hero's Handbook. However, it's in the final section of the book. And most players are just going to be relying on their character sheets. Your exploration activity can have a real impact on an encounter if one were to begin. This game choice is admittedly somewhat gamey. However, it's an interesting choice, and it prompts everybody to think as a team. Perhaps the GM should prompt the fighter player to defend and be in front of the party, so that if combat breaks out, his shield is already raised, giving him a bonus to AC. Maybe the rogue should be avoiding notice, so that she can roll stealth for initiative, which procs her surprise attack class feature. All enemies are off guard to her who has not acted before her turn. Because it seems like nobody at the table knew about exploration activities, Pepper had his bad experience having to spend 5 actions trying to sneak attack somebody. Other common exploration activities: detect magic. This is one way the group could have easily found a corpse that had a magic item on them. One player's scouting gives everyone a +1 circumstance bonus to their initiative roll. Search is a way to find things that are hidden, like secret doors or traps. And investigate is a way to use your mental skills to think about the environment. And by the way, I mod this in my game so that you're using all of your mental skills. You don't have to choose one. By the way, the beginner box does not present the core rules on detecting traps. Here are the core rules. It says that you can... Hi, Megan. It says everyone gets a secret perception check to detect the hazard only if the hazard does not list a minimum proficiency rank to detect it. This is referring to your perception stat. Many traps in Pathfinder say that you need to be trained or something higher to detect it. In those cases, you need to be actively searching with your exploration activity to find that trap. What the beginner box does here is simply have every trap they encounter not have a minimum proficiency level. So everyone gets a perception check. Now, it's completely understandable why they would not introduce this wrinkle in the rules for a beginner product. However, it does have the downside in not showing players a rule, and it lessens the impact of exploration activities, which this product is not prioritizing. Now, I don't know if this was the best way to deal with traps, but my bottom line is that the beginner box should teach exploration activities. By the way, here are a couple of references of skill actions and exploration activities made by the community. This one was made by pipmentor. Now, it might be too much for beginning players, but experienced players might appreciate this, and also people who want to study the system. Also, Nupky has created an excellent character sheet redesign. There's a form-fillable version and a non-form-fillable version that includes all of the skill actions the various skills can give you, summarizes all of the actions and conditions in the player core book, and exploration activities. Again, maybe not for someone's first game, you know your players best, but very useful tools. I'll have links in the description. Problem number 5 is that the beginner box has no hero points. Hero points are part of the default core difficulty of Pathfinder 2e. At the start of every Pathfinder session, every player gets 1 hero point, and you get to earn additional hero points. You can hold a maximum of 3 for particularly creative ideas or memorable moments that you create. You can either spend 1 hero point or re-roll a d20 check you've already made, or you can spend all of your hero points, minimum 1, to avoid death. When your dying condition would increase, you can instead stabilize, lose the dying condition, and also you don't tick up your wounded condition, the condition that makes it easier for you to die in the future. I think hero points are good for the game. That's why they're in the core rules. They make players feel good for being rewarded for doing things the GM likes. The GM can incentivize certain behaviors. It makes the game easier. And for a first-time experience with Pathfinder, you want people to have a positive experience, especially since level 1 Pathfinder is harder than higher levels in the game. Now, I imagine the designers thought that hero points might add a level of complication. And I think this is a good time to give the GM the advice that all GMs should know: to farm out tasks to players. GMs need help. They have too many things to think about. Players should help them do things like track initiative or damage to certain enemies. This is another thing you can farm out, and players will, if prompted, definitely prompt you, if you ask them to give them a hero point about once every hour, which is the recommendation. My sixth problem with the beginner box is that it is too tutorial-like for some people. It's honestly not that different from the tutorial in a video game, in that you have a somewhat scripted set of encounters that are encountered in more or less the same order, roughly, by every group. First off, I don't think this is necessarily bad, and I think it's a good thing for a tutorial dungeon, which is what this is. Also, I think a lot of the community need to realize that this product isn't really made for us. It's made for people brand new to the system. And in particular, a younger age group. I taught an after-school, middle school D&D Pathfinder class for 8 years, and people in that age appreciate and want a more structured experience. A 12-year-old child may not exactly be confident portraying a non-player character in a conversation with other people, or might not know how to improvise and deal with unexpected decisions from the group while providing the intended tutorial that the beginner box is trying to provide. Also, kids might be less attracted by the role-playing aspect of RPGs and might be more attracted to the action. Now, I say all of this with a full understanding that kids can probably run circles around us veterans when it comes to coming up with creative ideas and role-playing. So I think it was right for the beginner box to present basically a scripted set of encounters, including many combat encounters. On the other hand, I think there was more support that the beginner box should give for decisions the players make or questions that they ask that the GM might not expect. Now, I'm going to give 2 examples from the beginner box, and we're going to now enter the realm of light spoilers. This is your warning. First, we're presented with several encounters with kobolds, and they are intended to be combat encounters only. They are supposed to attack on sight. This is what Jacob does in the game.
I keep looking at this skill diplomacy. I think I'm going to try and use it here. Hello, chums.
They all turn around.
He's doing the right thing by having them attack on sight if you want the intended experience of the beginner box, because if you don't, the adventure changes significantly. They are the main adversaries in the adventure, and there's more than one combat encounter with them where the game is supposed to be teaching you various rules. If you want to run it differently, which certainly is your prerogative, then we've gone beyond what a beginner product should be providing, and you may want to consider an alternative adventure, which I'll get to later in the video. Now, it didn't have to be this way. Even the first edition Pathfinder beginner box had humanoids you can interact with who were only potential adversaries, and it gave guidance on what to do if the party approached peacefully. In this beginner box, the party may very well want to interrogate one of the kobolds to get more information. But in the first room where they encounter kobold, it doesn't mention this possibility. And you have to go later in the book to nearly the end of the whole adventure to find this guidance for if the party is interrogating one of them. It doesn't give it when it might first come up. And also, it countenances it only happening simply because the game master decides that that kobold will surrender. Not that the players might let one live. Also in this adventure, the party encounters a complex trap. Complex traps in Pathfinder have their own initiative, and the party has to do a number of things, including skill checks, to try to disable it while dealing with the danger the trap presents. But what if the party reasonably decides to leave the room? Does the trap expend itself, which the party has a reasonable expectation it would do, or does it go on forever and suspend disbelief and make people wonder, okay, why haven't the kobolds set off this trap? And if the trap expires, well, there goes the chance of the party learning how to deal with complex hazards in the system. Now, I appreciate the extent to which Paizo scripts things in its adventures to make sure we have material as game masters to work with. But sometimes, they take too little account of what else might happen when players encounter things in their adventures. Though still miles ahead of Wizards of the Coast adventures, I must say. Storm's King Thunder Chapter 3, I'm looking at you. For the kobolds here, there should have been a note for the GM of what to do if the players want to parlay. And there's also this annoying tendency I find in Paizo adventures. It's a small issue, but I find it annoying, where you have a script of how something might play out that might not make sense. So you're supposed to stumble upon kobolds right when they're breaking into the door of a cell. So the timing is already terribly coincidental. And isn't it possible that this can go down some other way? Maybe you heard them trying to break into a metal gate before approaching. Maybe they noticed you, since after all, the party was just trying to scale a wall about 30 feet away from them down the hall and probably had a light source, and these kobolds who had dark vision probably are not using a light source, so maybe they noticed the party in advance. Now, I don't see any of my 12-year-olds from my class, who are probably the target audience for this product, questioning any of this. But I see some older players reacting to this and asking, wait, what? The second example in this beginner box is that the place is not very believable. Why is there a gigantic complex beneath a fishery? Why is there a crypt? Why is there a shrine to a god? I've run the beginner box and I've had people examining the tomb trying to find out what god they worshipped or what civilization created this here, thinking there might be a greater mystery behind all of this and that the menace to Otari that the adventurers named has something to do with it. But there are no answers to these questions because it's just randomly there. This is kind of like the previous example where the kobolds are just there for you to kill them. Meanwhile, it's common practice to design dungeons for D&D and Pathfinder where there are various factions you encounter that might be at war with each other that you can try to engage with, where encounters are more than just combats. And again, in the first edition Pathfinder Beginner Box, you might encounter some humanoids who ask you to go to somewhere else in the dungeon to get some thingamajig, which makes you encounter a different adversary instead. In the Dungeon Dudes review of the Beginner Box, they present this legitimate concern that for a first-time experience in a TTRPG, this dungeon doesn't really show the potential of what a tabletop role-playing game can be. You can roleplay, you can immerse yourself in a believable world. You can, as a group of friends, create a memorable story that is uniquely yours. And as part of your immersion, the dungeon should feel like a living, breathing place. There's a reason things are there. It's a place you can explore, where you can ask questions and get answers. Intelligent denizens might have their own agendas, and if you retreat to town and rest and return, they might set up traps to prevent you from getting in. It should feel like a world and not a tutorial. Again, I see why this box is designed the way it is for their targeted demographic. But there are many game masters who might want to use the excellent teaching tools that are provided in this box, but use a different starting adventure, or follow up immediately with an adventure that has less of these issues I'm talking about. I'll cover some of those adventures at the end. Number 7 is that the beginner box, I think, gives an overly negative impression of skills. Pathfinder skills are awesome, but as presented here, they can feel like a chore. There's a notorious 10-foot cliff in the second room of the dungeon that everyone needs to climb down, and Jacob's group didn't like it.
I go 5 feet, and then I go 5 more feet, and then I go 5 more feet.
And most groups probably don't like it, to be honest. It demonstrates the 4 degrees of success system. If you succeed, you travel 5 feet down. If you critically succeed, you go down 10 feet. If you fail, you make no progress. If you critically fail, you fall down. However, the way it's presented, the book makes it seem like, well, the book says that you have to check for every 5 feet, and that if you fall 5 feet, you take 2 damage. However, it's completely believable. Her idea is completely believable that you'll be hanging from the edge and just safely fall for the remainder of the distance.
What if I hold on to the ledge and then just let go?
And the thing is, that is actually how the core rule reads. You only take damage if you fall more than 5 feet. There's a contradiction between the beginner box rules and this core rule, which is actually more generous. So really, they only needed to make one check to travel 5 feet and jump the remainder. Now, the intent here is pretty clear. The beginner box is showing that there are defined ways you can use your skills and is showing the 4 degrees of success. And also, failure doesn't have to mean catastrophe. It can just mean no progress. It's also an occasion to show that, okay, probably someone is going to think to look in their pack and bring out the rope. And it shows everybody that you can just change the difficulty class, the target number, to reward creative ideas. I think it's a necessary teaching exercise, and I do think it probably should have been a 15-foot cliff and let you jump the last 5 feet so that it doesn't teach the wrong rule and make the system seem overly petty. However, many groups, probably most groups, don't want to make all of these checks for, say, a 50-foot wall. And that's what they say in the video.
God forbid we have to go down like a 50-foot cliff or something.
Now, there actually are some groups who might enjoy the tension of climbing up a 50-foot wall. Your mileage may vary. And I also know that many young players that I would GM would just relish the chance of rolling dice, period. And if they were to fall and take damage, they just think that's hilarious and a lot of fun. But for most experienced TTRPG players, this can feel repetitive, painful, and unfun, at least compared to D&D's rule of letting you climb a wall at half your speed. In reality, Paizo's published adventures don't run walls this way. They just have you make a single check to scale the entirety of the wall, or to swim across a body of water. There's a similar system of traveling only so many feet per swim check. I think most game masters ask for these checks to travel every X feet only in encounters. And honestly, I think that is the unwritten intent. After all, and the beginner box does not convey this, but the climb action is a single action. You have 3 actions per turn, and a round in combat is 6 seconds. So this is about 2 seconds of work. If you think about it, this is actually quite realistic if you're thinking in terms of a combat. The DC of climbing a rope or a typical tree is trained or 15 in Pathfinder. So if you were to succeed on 2 of your 3 checks in a round to climb up a rope, you've traveled 10 feet up a rope in 6 seconds. That's actually pretty good. It makes sense to ask for these repetitive rolls only in combat when you're dealing with the stress and distractions of combat. So I think there's a missing sidebar in the beginner box saying that this exercise is to teach certain things, and that GM should feel free to simplify this or expedite it when you're in exploration mode and not in the middle of an encounter. There is a similar meh reaction by Jacob's group to the experience of picking a lock.
Picking locks is so complicated in Pathfinder. It just kind of gets repetitive and irritating. I don't know.
Now, here, the actual adventure says they should open the door on a single success. But Jacob understandably referred to the hero's handbook provided by the beginner box and referred to the rules there, where even the poorest lock requires 2 successes, not 1. Now, I need to register a complaint about Pathfinder here. I think that rules as written lock picking is pretty boring, given that the consequence of breaking your tools with a critical failure is getting a replacement pick that's 3 silver pieces to buy. I think there's an argument here of using D&D 4E system of getting X number of successes before Y number of failures. Also, as for the comparison of Pathfinder skills to D&D, spoiler alert, but skills get awesomer in Pathfinder. It sets rules and limitations for what you can do in a variety of situations so that you feel amazing when you break those defined rules. High-level characters, because you add your whole level to skills that you're trained in, can easily get a 25 and critically succeed at climbing down the beginner box wall. They can climb down or up a rope 30 feet in only 6 seconds. There's a skill feat that you can get when you're a master in athletics called Quick Climb that doubles all of these distances. And when you become legendary, you can use your full speed to climb up or down a wall. There's a level 1 acrobatics skill feat called Catfall that lets you ignore 10 feet of a distance when you fall. And when you become legendary, you can fall an infinite distance and not take damage or fall prone. But yeah, the beginner box gives an overly negative impression of skills outside of combat, which I don't think is necessary. Okay, my last problem I'll point out in the beginner box is that the kobolds are too cute. When the party encounters their first group of kobolds that they're supposed to kill according to the adventure, there's a picture on that page, and this is the kobold that the GM is expected to show to the party. So cute! I want to make it my pet. And given that the target audience of this beginner box is probably, like, let's say 10 to 14-year-olds who, from my experience, love to have animal companions and non-human friends, this is a recipe for, well, if you want to run the adventure as written, disaster. Now, I love the artwork of kobolds, by the way. I think Wayne Reynolds did this redesign. This is less a criticism of the adventure and more of a GMing tip. If you want to run the adventure as intended and have the kobolds be adversaries that they kill, do what Jacob did and have them attack on sight. And don't show them the picture. Just don't. At least don't show the artwork before the fight starts. Also, dbones90, who gives an excellent guide to the beginner box that I'm going to share later, gives them a motive. They don't want you to steal the treasure that they think is behind the gate. The beginner box doesn't have rules for languages, by the way, and it does not list known languages by the kobolds. I would just have the kobolds yell, "Our treasure." Also, young people and or their parents, and also older people, might not be comfortable with killing these cute, cuddly creatures. Maybe make clear that they can be knocked out. You can deliver non-lethal damage, which by rule you can do with a non-lethal attack like your fist or another limb, or with a -2 circumstance penalty to the roll. Or you might want to ignore that penalty altogether. Up to you. I have other tips about running the beginner box, but this video is already getting too long, and I don't know how much interest there is out there for like detailed GMing tips advice. And I'm probably going to get flooded now because I said that with comments saying, make more GM tips videos. But yeah, when my Discord server ran a big event with over 100 people running the beginner box for people, the people who ran the event, me and several other people, we came up with this Google Doc that gave advice for running this adventure, both general advice, but also room by room advice, how to use the Foundry module, how to scale it for 3 or 5 players, which was the size of the groups in our event, and advice on monster tactics and rules to keep in mind for each room. There will be a link in the description. Also, there's an excellent guide, a more involved hack of the beginner box made by dbones90. Here is the Reddit post, link in description, and here is the Google Doc. They introduce a different adventure hook and some non-player characters. They also give excellent advice addressing some of the issues I brought up in this video, some reasons for why some things are in the dungeon, some motives for the monsters, and some appreciated doors between rooms. Also, we talk about this in our Discord server's Google Doc, but you may want to run the original monsters that are in the Monster Core book from the full rules. It's completely understandable why the beginner box simplified some monsters. And they run just fine as is in the beginner box, but you might be a little bit more ambitious and want to show more of what exists in Pathfinder. For example, with the venomous spider, you might want to introduce the real poison in Pathfinder, which progresses in stages that go up and down, where you have to make a save every turn until you can get rid of it. For the undead they encounter, you may want to consider giving them the unique abilities that zombies and skeletons can have. Some of them are really cool, like the Screaming Skull skeleton that can remove its head, throw it at people, bite people with it, and terrify the party. The Zulgath's BO is a way to introduce the sickened condition. And sickened is very flavorful. You cannot willingly ingest potions, and you can spend an action to retch to remove the condition. All right, alternative adventures if you don't want to use the beginner box adventure, and also potential sequels after you run the beginner box for your friends. There is a new box set that Paizo has announced coming out in August, I believe, called Dawn of the Frogs. It's a level 1 adventure. It has everything you need in it, including maps and cardboard pawns for the party and monsters and pre-generated character sheets. It's 3 short mini adventures to be run on 3 different game nights. It's part of their new game night series that they are launching. They have said it is streamlined in comparison to the beginner box, without rules for making characters or how to build your own adventure. And it's for people familiar already with the concepts of tabletop role-playing. This looks to me like it would be a nice sequel to the beginner box, which concludes with the party at level 2. I don't think it's designed to do that. Someone will need to, either Paizo or the community, put up some adjustments for the encounters so that they work for a level 2 party. It also looks like it would be a great way to introduce Pathfinder to your friends who may be familiar with D&D or other tabletop role-playing game systems. It might be a tutorial that feels less like a tutorial. And in fact, I wonder if this is Paizo trying to appeal to that audience specifically. Another alternative first adventure that has been getting good word of mouth is Rusthenge, which starts at level 1 and goes up through level 3. I enjoyed running it myself. I ran about half of it before real life issues broke up the group. It has more of a story, definitely, than the beginner box, and it also gives explicit guidance and rules for the GM to handle the party coming up with alternate solutions to some NPC interactions and to other problems. Paizo also published an adventure that was intended to be the sequel to the beginner box called Troubles in Otari. It starts at level 2 when the beginner box ends, and it has an adventure for level 2, level 3, and level 4. They also assume a beginner game master, and 2 of the adventures are straightforward dungeon crawls, and the middle chapter is relatively open-ended. It's also set in the town of Otari. The town is fleshed out more in the beginner box, so if you like the idea of having a hometown and NPCs the party can interact with, that's another argument for this adventure. All of these recommendations have been shorter, spanning only a few levels at most, which is probably what you want to do with a group that's new to the system. You don't know if every member of your group will like Pathfinder after all. These next recommendations are for adventure paths, and the next one to consider is Abomination Vaults. It is a mega dungeon, also in the town of Otari. Now, it's kind of trendy nowadays in the Pathfinder community to say that it's overrated and overhyped. But I think it's fine if you and your group are fine with a dungeon crawl, the classic mega dungeon, where you are dealing with combats, traps, factions, all of those things are here. And this being a Paizo adventure, there's usually more for the GM to work with than here is a monster in a room. You also get to continue to have that consistent home base of the town of Otari. Now, FYI, there is a highly acclaimed mega dungeon adventure path out there called 7 Dooms for Sandpoint, but it spans levels 4 through 11, which you may want to check out, but it's not something to start with. You want to start at level 1 generally with a new group. Finally, there is the #1 adventure path of all time, at least according to a community poll, and probably the most authoritative guide to the adventure paths put out by Tarondor. This is the Season of Ghosts adventure path. It's a Eastern-themed adventure that spans level 1 through 12. Tarondor writes, more than 50% of reviewers gave it 10 stars, 90% gave it a rating of 8 stars or better. Nothing else came even remotely close to that level of acclamation. Other than to say it's really good, it becomes difficult to say much about Season of Ghosts because it's so easy to ruin the experience by knowing too much about it. So having read some of it, I would say that yes, there is a cracking good mystery in Season of Ghosts. If your group is ready to make the commitment of jumping into an adventure path, here is one to consider. Also, I'll include a link to Tarondor's guide to the adventure paths, the 44 adventure paths as of the time of this recording, in the video description. So that's it. I really enjoyed XP to Level 3's video, and I encourage people to comment on his video. He says the following at the very end.
Let me know what you want to see again in the future. I would like to take suggestions. What do you guys think? Maybe we'll do more Pathfinder. I don't know. That would be fun. I like Pathfinder. Go play Pathfinder.
I think he literally wants to get encouraged to do more Pathfinder content, that he wants to do so. And if he does, that would be great. Folks should also check out Eberron City of Towers on the Arcane Arcade channel, which I think is Jacob's first experience with Pathfinder, where he is frequently saying how much he likes the system. As for me, make sure to like this video, of course, and to subscribe to my channel. Support my Patreon if you haven't already, for ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. And also join my Discord. We're now over 6,000 people, where we talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming. If you want to play Pathfinder, you can join our free drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.